Let's go.
That's the very end of the opera. Before we started, we listened to the very beginning, which is a duet for the acoustic violin and the theremin cello, and it ends with a ether box theremin and theremin cello duet. So,
Okay, cool. I don't think we can hear you, Juan.
Yeah, that was pretty haunting.
There you
Yeah, my bad. Kind of like I really enjoyed that eerie feeling. Quite a way to end. We just listened to Jonathan Golove's like chamber opera mental radio, the ending of it, and he's the guest we have today.
Yeah.
He's a composer, he's a cellist, and he's a professor, of course, of many subjects in music, and the director of John in Buffalo. We welcome him.
Yeah. It's great to see you.
Thank you for being here. We
Oh,
really appreciate it.
thanks for the invitation. It's wonderful to see all three of you. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
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 I will say that's the statement.
Feels like a
Yeah,
reunion.
I know. we were chatting a little bit about the theremin cello before we started. Yeah, but how does it differ? Because I'm familiar with like the regular box theremin. So and like how one hand is for frequency and one hand's for dynamic. So how does it differ? Because it seemed like you were doing lots of things with both hands.
Right. Well, I was doing something a bit, you might say, unconventional. So I was actually using both hands for pitch. Theremin, one of the names he gave this instrument was fingerboard theremin. So there's no actual string, but there is a fingerboard, and it's the equivalent of one string. And so when you play it in the as it's intended to be played, I would say, you have that same division. One hand is on a lever for volume, which is the equivalent of the bow. That's the right hand, and the left hand is what's moving on the fingerboard. And what I was doing there, you might liken it to sort of the Eddie Van Halen two-handed fretting technique, right? So what I did was I was just kind of leaning on the volume lever with my elbow, and so that it was just on. I didn't really have a lot of control over volume, but I had volume, and then I could actually use both hands on the fingerboard. I also have, I say that I was leaning on with my elbow, but I'm not sure that's actually what I was doing in that case. I also have a little wooden plug that I can insert to hold the volume on. So I do have that option of playing, but nevertheless, it's a monophonic instrument. So when I do that, it almost sounds like I'm able to play more than one note at a time, which is kind of what, the effect I'm after. But actually, it does only play one note at a time. So anytime I jump, from the low register to the high register, it's always cutting off the other note when I do that.
Yeah, it kind of creates a polyphony of sorts, I would say. You can pretty much do two lines. I really enjoyed it. I would like to explore it more. So
Yeah.
that would be like it was quite a while ago, right? But it kind of like it would be, would you say that the theremin would be very recent in your repertoire? You are always looking for repertoire for it, and
Yeah, because the only known composition back from the time of the instrument's early heyday, which was basically in the 30s, was Edgar Varèse's Equatorial, which he originally wrote for two theremin cellos. And it was only performed one time, the work's premiere in Town Hall in New York. And it was kind of a catastrophe. And by the time Varèse summoned up the will to come back to the piece, he didn't realize that theremin was no longer in the United States. And he wrote him this amazing letter, which was preserved, but theremin never got it until it was delivered to him in the late 80s by the person that brought me really into the project of recreating the theremin cello, a musicologist named Olivia Mattis. Olivia Mattis handed theremin the letter. The first time he came out of the Soviet Union, he was invited to an early electronic music festival in Europe in the late 80s. And she delivered the mail, that this letter that Varèse had written to him. And Varèse said, in essence, Varèse was writing him to say, well, I need your instruments again. But he said it in such a poetic way. And what he said is just this line that has stayed with me. He said, I dream of instruments that will be obedient to the composer's thought. So he had this idea, of just being able to kind of spontaneously ideate music and have electronic instruments that could create that for him. And he thought that theremin, was a kind of partner in that futuristic enterprise. So, but unfortunately, the letter never reached its addressee. So he didn't get it until much, much later. And in the meantime, Varèse had gone through a few stages of trying to replace the theremin cello, and he settled on the Ondes Martenot, which was certainly a very, very logical choice, and has done very well for the intervening decades. Now I think it makes sense to go back to the theremin cello, really, because in fact, Varèse had experience with both instruments, and he really did choose the theremin instrument. And I think there's something of a difference in the way that they express themselves that makes sense. And I have to say that one of the big honors in the whole theremin cello project was performing the equatorial in Amsterdam at the Holland Festival. And So Sung, who was Varèse's assistant, amanuensis, and all of those things, and kind of the keeper of the Varèse legacy, was there. And afterwards, he said to me, "I think this is how Varèse wanted to hear the piece." So I really do feel that the Varèse, and the theremin cello are meant to go together. We haven't yet recorded the piece. It's been performed at Lincoln Center. We've done it a bunch of times. In Paris at the Salle Pleyel, in London at the South Bank Center, and of course the very first time at UB in Buffalo in Silly Hall back in 2002.
Yeah, it's not every day that you see a new instrument that was meant for like like canonic composers from the 20th century wrote for them.
Right.
Yeah, you visualize the Ons Martenot because of course, somebody like, especially Messiaen in the Turangalila Symphony, he kind of immortalized it, but it wasn't readily available. But it was more available than this other instrument.
Right.
Like the possibilities of writing are it's still on Pampers, on diapers, let's say. It's like if it gets much produced, or if it gets at least if you get some performers to have the instrument, like it will be really, it could even get standardized in a way, like the Martinos almost had, I would say. What would you write for it, Chanting? What would you write for it?
Theremin.
Theremin, yeah.
Yeah, I think I will have a hard time.
Hard time? Why?
Yeah, because I couldn't imagine how the fingers work on the board, because it's like two hands suddenly. Yeah, because psychologically I understand it is like sort of like a cello, but it is not being played in the same way. So maybe I have to change my mind a little bit before I start writing for it. Yeah, that's all I feel. Yeah.
Well, Chanting, I know how you feel, but I would tell you this: that was a little bit of an unusual choice to show you that first, because really that two hands on the fingerboard technique it's very very complicated to master from the playing side, and the way playing it as it's really intended with one hand, and with the other hand controlling the dynamic shaping of the notes, is a much more straightforward to visualize. It's just difficult for the player because it's like playing on a one-stringed instrument. So you have to be shifting a lot, and you have to find notes kind of out of the blue. But the complexity of what you were seeing there is atypical. Let's put it that way. Definitely atypical. But I think you would not be all alone in feeling a little bit like, what would I do with this? Because I think for many composers today, the idea of a monophonic instrument is kind of very hard to conceive. So I think, why not pieces with accompaniment of whatever kind, whether that's electronic accompaniment or it's other instruments. I mean, I really kind of encourage. I don't know if some of you did you overlap with Zane Merritt?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So Zane composed a piece. Zane composed a duet for us to do for electric guitar and theremin cello. It's a really, really nice piece. And we're actually in discussions about him doing some more.
Was it recorded?
There is a recording, yes, we haven't put it on the internet. We probably should. We should post that one. It's actually very, very nice.
Yeah, I would say so, because only because of its rarity. But I'm sure it's a good piece. But the timbric or timbral possibilities, it opens up a new world. Now that you're mentioning it with accompaniment and all of that, it's kind of like, and what you said is like, I wouldn't think about writing for it like I will with an Ons Martenot, because with the Ons Martenot, you see the ring and it's kind of like more stiff in a way. Cello is kind of like, you make it more part of your body. You can move around with it. It's kind of like really, you're hugging it, right? Kind of like, not like, well, you also hug the cello, but it's bigger and it's not in the same manner that it seems
Mhm.
like you were there like one per you and the instrument kind of become one or
Right.
in a way. But uh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it has
Megan, what would you
fluidity.
do with it? Because you don't really love pitch. Megan is one that
Oh,
I'm
I don't hate pitch either. I don't hate pitch either. Yeah.
learning.
I don't know. I mean, I think I would have to listen to a lot more and explore. I mean, I don't think I would. I think a lot of like what Shantine was saying, like you'd have to, detach it from like cello and kind of start anew. But I kind of feel like I try to do that every time I write a piece. I try my best to pretend even if I was writing a piece for cello, to pretend like I, if at least at the beginning, like if I didn't know what this was, like how might I approach or interact it? I can kind of be more fresh. But of course, like yeah, then I can use like my knowledge of the instrument to sculpt the piece. But I think I feel like my starting point would be similar because I do work with a lot of variety of non-conventional instruments as well. So I think it could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I among the pieces that have been written for me, there's a German composer Florian Zwissler who wrote a piece for theremin cello and Max, and in this piece you really don't hear the theremin cello at all. It's the theremin cello that kind of controls or modifies things, sounds and oscillations that are coming from the Max patch, and it creates its own kinds of oscillations by the way it's played. It sort of becomes a giant oscillator itself. Then I have a fixed media piece by a composer, a Belarusian composer who's based in Cologne, Germany, named Oksana Omelchuk. And she did a piece that uses not only electronic sounds, but also recordings from a very late interview with theremin. I have another piece composed by Rochus Aust, another German composer, which uses the speaking voice along with the theremin cello. So people have been finding ways to move beyond just simply one note at a time kind of composing, and I think there's lots of possibilities. I mean, if you want to get away from pitch, the theremin cello signal can be used to then control in various ways. Some other sounds, and to gate those sounds or whatever approach you took. But one of the things that happened early on in playing the Varese, which was my first project with it, Varese actually wrote notes that are so high they're above the top range of the piano.
Oh, wow.
And apparently he convinced theremin, or he managed to get theremin to make theremin cellos that could do this. But those instruments don't exist, and we don't know exactly what he did. The instrument that I have is probably based on the last of the prototypes that he made in the United States, which is lucky. It's probably the best and most advanced one that he made. But it can't go up that high. It goes high and not that high. But from the beginning, I had to solve that problem. And so I asked Floyd Engels, the man who recreated the instrument, to create a loop, an effect send loop, so that you could actually take the signal out and run it through something that would process it and then return it. And so I used that just with an octave effect, or I needed 2 octaves to get to the very highest notes. So so I used it to transpose the pitch. But the result of that is he began building all of them that way. So all of the instruments, and I have 5 of them, they're all equipped with an effect send and return. So that makes it quite possible to interface the instrument, with all kinds of electronics and do all kinds of things with it beyond what you see as the kind of basic possibility.
Can you connect it directly to effects?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
With that loop,
Yeah.
I can take it out. I can run it through. I have a massive array of
Pitch
pedals.
shifter, harmonizer, and stuff like that.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah.
And in the opera, in the opera, I'm actually using 2 main effects, which are Moog effects, the Mogerfogers, if you're familiar with those. So I'm using the ring modulator and the low pass Moggerfogers, and which are fabulous effects, And in different parts of the opera, I use different ones. Um,
I love the ring modulator myself.
Me too. Me too.
It's very unpredictable. I don't know how to control it quite yet. I don't know if anybody really knows how to control it fully, honestly speaking. But the results are really out there. I think that the results are amazing. That's a great combination because it's adding and subtracting the pitch, right? And you get a resulting pitch out of that, or so.
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
resulting pitches. It's kind of
Right.
like explaining it will be a bit complex, but yeah, we were listening to a mature Jonathan Golove, right? And you are kind of
Mhm.
like you've had quite a trajectory throughout the years. You are right now, as it says on your moniker, like director of June in Buffalo
Mhm.
Festival. So, would you like to mention to talk about how did you get from your formative years to where you are now?
Sure.
Bit about that.
Sure. How far do you want me to go back?
Let's say what got you into contemporary music or new music, because that's what we are. We all are
Right.
interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that actually started quite early on for me. I
Yeah.
came from a family where that prized music and spent a lot of time on music. And my father he was an amateur violist, but he was also incredibly knowledgeable about music and had an enormous collection of scores and records. And it was, we were very avid concert goers, which I started doing at a pretty young person. But we also, it was a ritual of listening to records, and very often with the scores on hand, because as I say, he had a nice collection of scores. And I don't know what age exactly I was that he first played me The Rite of Spring, but he had the score for it. And then Pierrot Lunaire. And those two pieces, plus the Bartok string quartets, just absolutely made, modern music my great love from, as say, kind of a relatively early age. But he had he had records of Stockhausen and records of much more contemporary things as well, and we listened to all of that very eagerly, Barrio, etc. So I really kind of came to university. I studied at the University of California, Berkeley, already kind of focused on contemporary music. And that was a great place to be for that, because the doctoral program in composition was very strong, and there were many opportunities to perform works by student composers as well as other composers on the Berkeley Contemporary Chamber Players, which was the name of the student ensemble that gave concerts every semester. So I was introduced to a lot of music there, and I really caught the bug. And I remember one of the things that was a great source of inspiration to me. I was studying with a very wonderful cellist, Bonnie Hampton, and I brought the cello part to a piece composed by one of the PhD students for some help, and she pushed me to play it, and to play it well, and to play better, and to give my all. And when we were done working on it, she said to me, "No, nobody could play that better than you just did." And what it was such a wonderful thing to say to a student. I mean, on some level, it couldn't be true, but in that moment, it was true, because there was nobody else to play it besides me, right? It was a brand new piece, and I was the one who had put the time in, and she had just kind of brought something out. But those words were really inspirational. It made me realize that when you're the one playing a piece for the first time, or a new piece in any event, you really could be that piece's foremost interpreter, which is something that you would be very hard pressed to do with a piece, of classical music, from the 19th century or from the 18th century, with a long tradition and all of these great artists ahead of you that you're just trying in some level to live up to, So that was really inspirational. And the other really great inspiration to me as a player came from a solo program that I had heard before I got to college at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, which is famous for the Monday evening concerts, that had been started by Robert Kraft and Igor Stravinsky and people like that. And those concerts continued during my, formative years. And the kind of legendary German avant-garde cellist Siegfried Palm came to play a concert, and it was an unaccompanied cello concert, which was certainly at the time something that was unheard of. Cellists didn't come and play without piano, That was, they might play one piece without piano on a program with a pianist, but they weren't going to play all unaccompanied music. But he began, with the classical repertoire, and then he played all of these pieces that had been composed for him by Penderecki and Zimmermann, etc. And I thought to myself, I really have to study with this man at some point. And I was able to do that through a traveling fellowship that UC Berkeley offered. So I spent a year after I graduated, I spent in Cologne, Germany, working with him, learning a lot of this, music that he had created. He'd been the first performer of. So that, those were from the standpoint of playing, really, really big inspiration in the field of contemporary music.
So you basically you went into the West Coast and there absorbed all of that tradition that people like Schoenberg and Stravinsky had established.
Mm-hmm.
Following composers, professors kind of like led on, like that's your base, that's your foundation then.
That's fair to say. In fact, I was mentioning to someone recently, if you go to the music department at UCLA, and I don't know if this is still true, but I'm hoping it is, in the building that houses one of the concert halls where we often went to hear concerts, there was a studio that they said was Arnold Schoenberg's composition studio. And you could look in through a window. You couldn't go in, but it had all of his things. It had his drafting table and his old-fashioned drafting tools, and and his cello. So that was kind of, wow, Arnold Schoenberg played the cello, and there's his studio, and this is what it looked like. So that was kind of a bit formative too, because I walked by that room many times as a young person, mm-hmm. and looked in every time thinking about, okay, that's where that happened.
Yeah.
So
no, and it makes a lot of sense, because you have the trajectory we're talking about with Theremin, that you've generated a lot of new repertoire from all sorts of composers.
Right. Well, I definitely have felt that was part of the mission, but also part of my excitement about, being a musician is to be involved in those kind of projects. So that's been important to me. And I started composing also during my college years. I had done a bit before that. And I was already interested in improvising as well. But I had a teacher when I was in Berkeley, a man named John Swackhammer, who, was a really kind of wonderful figure who said, I won't look at anything you've written until you've finished it. I'm not going to interfere along the way. Anything that I would say to you along the way will just,
influence you, right?
Influence you in some way, and you need to write these pieces because you're just getting started. You need to write these pieces and get them out of your system, basically. So write short pieces so that you can finish one before you come to your next lesson, and then we'll look at the whole piece and we'll evaluate that. And then rather than take my comments and go and revise it, write the next piece with those things in mind. And I think that was a very, very helpful way to start writing. And at the same time, an older student, a graduate student at the time at Berkeley, was Evan Ziporyn, who's gone on to a lot of fame, I would say, as a founding member of the Bang on the Can All-Stars, as a professor at MIT, wonderful clarinetist and composer. And one day, Evan said, Anthony Braxton is leading his improvisation ensemble at Knowles College, and he's looking for players. Would you like to go? And so Mills College is in Oakland, not too far away from Berkeley, and we took the trip out there. And Anthony Braxton, greeted us with warmth and open arms and said, "Oh, fantastic! Okay, here we're going to play these pieces." And he started pulling music out of a big box, and it was, I would say, a very formative experience in terms of improvised music for me. And even though actually the music wasn't fully improvised music in any sense, I mean, he was handing us very, very thoroughly composed parts. But the idea that he would be combining different pieces together, making spontaneous decisions about what should be heard together, and there was improvisation involved, was also very, very formative for me. So those were some of the early experiences.
So you end up at the University of Buffalo, and there. When did you begin teaching there? Up until now that you are kind of like director of Uni Buffalo.
Well, I arrived there as a PhD student.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
In 1994. So
1994. Okay.
I had gone to work on my master's in composition at the Cleveland Institute of Music when Donald Erb was there, and when I was, who was also an incredible mentor and wonderfully supportive figure, and inspirational as well. And when I was getting ready to apply to doctoral programs, he made several recommendations about where I should apply, and he said, "You should apply to Buffalo because a former student of mine that is there, and he's a fantastic teacher, David Felder, whom I know you've had on your program." And so I drove over and met David, and went to his house, as he I think very often really had a wonderful personal touch. Fed me coffee. And I don't remember what else, but I remember the coffee very well.
Coffee's a deal breaker.
Yeah, and it was just clear to me, based on the experiences I had visiting other schools, that really that was the place for me. And so I went from Cleveland to Buffalo in 1994, which is also the beginning of my association with June in Buffalo.
So you began presenting there, and then became faculty over there, like teaching cello. I remember when we studied there, you taught cello, you taught composition, you were part of the ensembles.
Right.
I remember you having a big influence on a colleague of ours, TJ Borden, for example, being a mentor figure to him, like, and
Right.
he's doing his own thing now.
Fabulously well.
Curious because he went back.
He's had quite a great career.
He went back to California, right? I
Yes,
think.
he went to UC San Diego. He did his
Yeah,
doctorate.
it's kind of like it goes full circle, like,
Right.
right, in a way. So now you are there directing the June Buffalo Festival. So what can you tell us about it? What are the logistics? Well, you can speak about it a lot because like from the inside, because if you've been involved with it since 94, you've been involved with it as a composer, as a performer, like at various stages, at various levels. What are the logistics that go behind that? Because for us students, or like when we were students, it's kind of like more or less a mystery. We just participate, we're worried with our scores or our performances. It's kind of an eccentric week and all of that,
Right. Well, as you might imagine, there's a lot of organization that goes into the festival, and it's on a number of different fronts that activity goes on. There is the decisions and the recruiting of a group of senior composers to be the mentors, and all the decisions about programming in terms of what works of theirs will be heard. There is then the recruiting of the cadre of participant composers, and again, making decisions about what pieces can be programmed, should be programmed, and which ones should be invited. Of course, that goes without saying. And then very, very important decisions about who the performers will be each year. June in Buffalo has gone through a lot of stages in terms of how the performing forces are kind of brought together. When I first started in 1994, David was the director, David Felder, was largely bringing together performers in an ad hoc way. He was creating ensembles to be, to present all of the music that needed to be performed.
Was that like the formation of Slee Sinfonetta?
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And the Slee Sinfonietta didn't yet have that name, but he was bringing together the ensemble to play that, and then all of these chamber ensembles. The Buffalo Philharmonic was involved, and sometimes there were visitors, distinguished visitors, people like Irvin Arditi, or wonderful pianists, etc., soloists who were coming in. But for example, in my first couple of June in Buffaloes, I believe, I was a member of what was called the June in Buffalo String Quartet. So you may remember years when groups like the Arditi Quartet were coming to June in Buffalo, but at the time the June in Buffalo Quartet was a fully ad hoc group. We didn't have any existence outside of June in Buffalo. We didn't play together regularly, although some of the members probably had played together in different situations. And I can tell you it was quite a big stress to try to become a string quartet to play, let's say, 7 to 9 pieces over the course of a week, challenging pieces. So that experiment yielded to bringing in, more preformed groups. And that's been the way, I think, for June in Buffalo. I think the idea of an ad hoc June in Buffalo string quartet was tried and decided, okay, there's a better way to go about doing this. And I've had, I had the Arditi Quartet actually twice, come to the festival. So I think over a number of years, David began to move more in the direction of inviting resident ensembles, and that's been our something that I also have followed on, with the exception of the Slee Sinfonietta, which became more of an ongoing ensemble over the years, and therefore has been a strong component of June in Buffalo, I think, really since those early years. And this year, the Slee Sinfonietta is our only resident ensemble, actually, because of something that I decided to do. I decided to do a kind of a special project June in Buffalo this year that's a bit different than the festival as you know it, and we can talk about what that is. So recruiting the performers, recruiting the participants and the seniors, that's a big part of it. The programming of the concerts. Sometimes we'll do an event off campus that always requires some organization as well. There's the creating of the program book, and those kinds of materials, which we're now moving in more electronic directions, although we still print a program book. Whatever publicizing of the event that we do, that's certainly another side of this. I think June in Buffalo has never really worked hard to publicize itself far and wide. It's always understood itself as being a kind of intimate event that is a place for composers to come and be able to speak to one another and experience things together without too much of the pressure of we have to have a big audience. We have to somehow generate all of this attention to it. A little bit, you might say, what's the word? Well, intimate, in that sense. But at times of course we like to have audiences. So at times, we do things to try to make that more abundant. Yeah.
So it kind of began more intimate, and like it grew a bit, became more stable, and you've seen that, and now you're making it, trying to make it grow, reach wider audiences and stuff like that. So I'm guessing that you have to get some funding from here and from there? How is the funding process? Like, uh, do you go private donors? Do you go public to the state of New York? How does that work? Or
Right.
the
Or is
thing,
the university, fund a
yeah,
lot of it?
or the
Right.
university itself sometimes, right? But that will
Yeah.
count be more or less public, like getting it from the
Yeah.
states. It's like,
Right.
well,
Right.
you will
So-
know. I don't know.
So I think you all are probably aware that what we actually have a center located in the music department called the Robert
Yeah.
and Carol Morris Center for 21st Century Music, and
Mhm.
June in Buffalo exists under the umbrella of the Center for 21st Century Music, and I'm also the director of the center. And the center was created by David Felder. Was a tremendous amount of work. Generating a university center is a very, very big administrative process, and kind of foundational to that was the generosity of Robert and Carol Morris, who created an endowment to support the center. So that endowment exists to this day, and it is part of the base of funding that the center has. And the center is not just June in Buffalo. It also encompasses activities during the academic year. But one of its main functions is to support June in Buffalo for sure. So there's the funding of the center. In addition, there is funding that comes from the university in a variety of forms, but primarily from the College of Arts and Sciences dean, who has essentially since the founding of the center agreed to provide a kind of fairly comparable level of support to the funding that is generated by the endowment. So those two things are very foundational. And yes, that's the state funding that we have. And actually we are prohibited by law from, for example, going to the State Arts Council. The State Arts Council can't fund a state entity like that we are. So that's an unfortunate way that these things work. We would need the funding to kind of go through hoops, I think, to enable that. But fundamentally, that can't happen. So, but there are private foundations that can support us through supporting the center, and there are a variety of those that have been really very, very wonderfully stable funders of the center. And among those, I'll just mention the Amphion Foundation, the Aaron Copland Foundation, and the Alice Ditson Fund at Columbia University. So those three have been really, very, very important to the center and to June in Buffalo. To June in Buffalo, I should say, because the funding is actually we actually apply as June in Buffalo to the organizations. There have been other funders, including the NEA over the years has funded June in Buffalo, but those are the main ones. So and in terms of other revenues to the center, of course, there are participation fees that the composers pay.
Mm-hmm.
But those actually they're really nominal, I would say, in terms of what it actually costs to put on even the works of those composers. Those funds don't go very far towards that basic task. So it really depends on the support of foundations, of the state, of the endowment to make it happen.
Okay. That's kind of like the accounting aspect of it. What
Mhm.
about the organizing aspect of it? How do you organize it? How do you choose? What are the first steps for you, like every year? Or I'm guessing that you plan ahead a few years, right? Like,
Right, you have to definitely do advanced planning. I mean, I would say the first steps are always trying to decide on the senior composers.
senior composer.
And so, to that end, I try to meet as many composers as I can in different places, speak with them, try to feel them out. Like, would they be interested in coming to Buffalo? is that, and in general, of course, the reaction is people want to come to Buffalo and they want to be part of June in Buffalo. And it's really, I have to say, I don't want to talk politics, but I have to say that this year was the first time that in speaking to composers in Europe, they expressed a lot of reluctance to come to the United States at this time. And
I don't blame
which
them.
I both understand, but I feel it too, because it could be a tremendous problem for us if at the last minute we learn, somebody that we're really counting on, that we've organized things around, is unable to come. So I had a conversation with a very, very well-known European composer who, I won't name her, but her comment to me was, "We all dream of coming to Buffalo," which that went straight to my heart. We all dream of coming to Buffalo, but maybe not right now. And that was also like a knife. I felt that. I tried not to show it in my face, but I understood perfectly, and it really hurt, to hear that. So in any event, but those choices, making those contacts in the field, and making those choices, I think that's kind of the first step.
So when you select them, do you just invite, composers who are interested in whenever they can come, or do you think about like a balance between the body of, or either contrasting composers or composers from a similar sector coming at the same year?
I think it's more from my point of view, I think following kind of David's example as well, thinking about a balance. Is I think the idea is that you want, first and foremost, you want people who are going to be helpful and supportive to young composers. I think that's in a way the central qualification for this, because all the people who get invited have careers as composers. It's not that they need to have their works played at the June in Buffalo Festival. They are all happy to have their works played at the June in Buffalo Festival, but it isn't a presentation festival in that sense. And it's a festival. It's a meeting of minds. It's a mentoring experience. So I think if you brought in people who fundamentally aren't really interested in young composers, that would be a big mistake. And if you brought people in who are unsupportive of young composers, that would probably yield some kind of bad experiences for people. So I actively try to avoid those things to the extent that I can. I can't always know, you take risks sometimes. But in general, you try to find out the best you can. Am I bringing people who are going to help people rather than, let's say, try to kill them? But Morton Feldman himself, the original founder, he wasn't always a really, somebody who was trying to make his students feel good about themselves. So
we've heard many stories.
Right. So I don't mean to say I'm only interested in inviting people who are going to be nice. But speaking to your question about balance, I think you really want to offer multiple points of view, so that you come in and you have people who are coming at this from different intellectual backgrounds, or different creative backgrounds, however you want to look at that, different points of view, and are offering those points of view so that the student has a rich experience. We try to have the students meet in these master classes with every member of that senior group. And so you're going to get, really a variety of opinions. And I think it wouldn't make sense to have them all kind of coming from the same aesthetic outlook.
How many students? Is it different, the number of students? I know it used to be different, the number of students, like quite drastically. So I'm not sure why, but is it still that way, or do you guys have like a number that you like?
Well, for the past 3 years, I've been shooting in the 20 to 25 range.
That's a good number.
And I thought that was a very good number. But this year I decided to do something different, and it's going to be quite a bit smaller. So, and that different thing, which I haven't said what it is yet, but I'll just say, I decided to make this the year of the composer conductor, and to really oriented the program around composers who want to take that kind of hands-on activist role, because I think that in the history of our music, those people have had such a kind of outsized influence, and you can go back, a couple of centuries if you want, to Mendelssohn and people like that. But just, looking at, two figures like Pierre Boulez and Leonard Bernstein, for example. I mean, the impact, or Lucas Foss in Buffalo, closer to home. The impact that these people had, not just in terms of making their own careers, which they certainly were able to help advance their own careers, and that's important, but what they were able to do for others in the field is just tremendous, right? And so the legacy of those figures, and I've looked around and I feel like there's really no resources for them. That's always been you want to do that on your own. That's if that's your mission. But no one is really trying to help or mentor that person. And so I thought, at least one time, there should be a festival that brings together people who are doing that professionally, people who are really taking very seriously the role of composer-conductor, with emerging composers who are themselves also serious about conducting. So
and
not
are
every
the senior composers also? Are
Yes.
the senior composers also composer conductors?
4 out of 5, yes.
Okay.
So they will not only be giving master classes and presenting on their own work as composers, they will be working with our participant composers on the podium. They will be there as though, because everyone is going to conduct his or her own piece. With the exception of a few people, as I mentioned. One of the senior composers is not a conductor. A few of the participants are not. So those folks will not be composing their own pieces. But my computer is telling me something that I don't want it to tell me. So we'll see. Hopefully I don't have any problem. It's telling my disk is full. Hopefully that doesn't impact this kind of thing at all. I wouldn't think so. But
We are that.
yeah, right. So in any event, everyone's going to have a decent amount of time on the podium with the Sleeve Sinfonietta, and there will always be a mentor on hand, to offer feedback. How is this going? What could you do differently and better?
So then, how are the concerts at night? Is this Sleeve Sinfonietta performing every night?
We're going to have fewer concerts. In the end,
Okay.
It's not going to be so many fewer, and I'll explain why. But the Sleeve Sinfonietta is going to do 3 programs, spaced out throughout the week, so that there's time to rehearse in between. What we've really cut down on are the afternoon concerts, the chamber concerts, because we don't have so many chamber works, and we won't really be able to rehearse that at the same time. And this is, by the way, quite expensive to have a Sleeve Sinfonietta, work that hard for the entire festival. That it's kind of fairly expanded. We're looking at sort of the top end of players, sort of like 16 players, which is bigger than we mostly have been able to field in the last years. So it's an expensive project, actually, which part of the reason we could have fewer. But it's also, we only have one. We can only do one ensemble at a time, so there just wouldn't be time to rehearse more pieces than that. But I've introduced a couple of things that are new since the time that you've been around, June, in Buffalo, and actually, I'll tell you about those things. The first one was very much inspired by a visit to Darmstadt. I went to Darmstadt just for several days to the famous so-called Ferienkurse, which they're not actually called that anymore, in 2023. And I learned about these kind of late night activities that they do, where the participants are kind of asked to curate themselves rather than
those open spaces.
Right. So I was inspired by that. I thought, and also by my own inclination towards improvised music, I thought, okay, why don't we start a kind of a late night improvisation ensemble for the participants that are interested in doing that kind of thing. And we've done that the last 2 years. And last year, they presented their work, to the public in a slightly more informal session. We did it in one of the basement rooms. But it came out really nice. I mean, as you know, a lot of composers are interested in improvising, and a lot of them have chops to do that. So that's something we'll continue this year as well. And then last year I decided to add something else new, which was the opportunity for performer composers, those composers, in other words, who are also performers, and have a solo piece that they would like to perform, to do so on, again, an uncurated evening, an evening where I would take whatever piece, was offered. And we had that as the opening night of last year's June in Buffalo, and it was a huge success. And it was something like, let's say, a third of the participant composers who wanted to perform on that, maybe a little more than a third. And it made for a really interesting evening. I was quite delighted by the results, and I wanted to do it again. And I thought among the group of composer conductors, I was likely to find a higher percentage of performers, and that's true. So we may actually end up with 2 evenings of these solo performances, and they can be electronic. They can involve electronic elements as well. So we had that last year too. We had some really interesting electronic improvisation, kind of noise-based improvisation by composers from Southeast Asia, and I just loved it. I mean, it was so kind of fresh. It was sort of something. It felt like something we haven't had before.
But yeah,
So,
and it seems to. I always remember there being a very vibrant improvisation scene in Buffalo for many years. So it kind of seems to pay like homage to that tradition in Buffalo too.
yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really good point, because that's very true, and it's only gotten to be more so. There's more of an underground improvisation scene now in Buffalo than even before.
Wow.
I think that I valued a lot that what you mentioned about having different points of view, because in one June in Buffalo, you could have bad experiences, very bad experiences with some people, either senior composers, other performers, and the best experiences with other performers or other, and learn a lot. Like, you learn either way, and you
Yeah.
gain experience either way in a condensed manner in a week. Like, I have a couple of memories that I will cherish, like, for the rest of my artistic life or of my life anyway. But I would like to ask my colleagues, like Sean Tin, do you remember anything notable of you of being of participating over there? Any premieres, any composers, or stuff like that?
I I certainly remember one seminar. I believe it was like a group lesson given by Bernard Rand. And
Bernard
yes, and then he asked us to present our pieces, and then I didn't have much idea of what I should present, and then I asked him also, what do you prefer me to present? And he said, oh, you are the composer, you should know what you want to present. And that really remind me that actually composers ourselves should have a clearer visions of what kind of art or music that we would prefer to present or prefer to write. Because if we don't know what to present, how can listeners know in advance that what they would like to hear, right? If we don't have something to present, right? Yeah, and a lot of times actually I believe that we also should have like try to find something a little bit more like groundbreaking or something that is not quite typical for the listener. So if I ask somebody what I should present, which means I'm just trying to cater listeners' expectation, but this is not the only job of a composer. Yeah.
What about you, Megan? I bet you have a few.
I remember a lot of different lectures. I remember when David Felder would give his lecture, he would always have the most everybody else would have these big PowerPoint and like very, very formal. And his was like the most informal. He would sit on the edge of the stage really casually, and it was like he was beyond captivating. Like he just knew how to formate lectures in that way. I remember when I had liaison for my piece for Melanie Aceto, the piano dancer piece.
Yes.
I had it premiered at June in Buffalo, and I remember for whatever reason, right before my piece, I don't think it was June in Buffalo's organization. I think it just some like nursing or retirement home must have thought about found June in Buffalo, and a big bus full of people came, and they came just before my piece, and I think they were highly confused because I think they were hoping to see nice chamber music, and instead there's a dancer strapped to a piano. So that was just kind of entertaining.
I think I remember it. It was kind of a disturbance, wasn't there?
Most likely
A
there
little
was.
bit, but it was what it was.
Megan has
Well,
that
and
effect. What about you?
um,
You've been so many decades associated with the festival. Can you name like a few highlights, like really highlights, because it's been such a long trajectory? It would be like the greatest hits of Buffalo. You could make you could make some of those. Like
Well, I certainly remember some things that were said specifically to me in master classes. In my very first years there. I think I was a participant a couple of years, and some of the really incredible performances. Stefano Scodanibio, the Italian double bass player, Irvin Arditi's solo recital.
oh yeah, those are amazing.
Those were really some amazing programs. Ensemble Signal did some spectacular programs. Some of the Sinfonietta programs that we did, I think came out really well. I already mentioned the June and Buffalo String Quartet, some of the most terrifying experiences that you could have as a player. But actually, I have been spending some time with lectures, because the lectures have been recorded for a long time, and I think there've been some headway was made towards transcribing some, but I'm not really sure where that stands. It's such a big project, a transcription project, although maybe with modern technology it would go a lot faster than when that was begun. But there's really this incredible backlog of fascinating composer talks from many years, and I started listening, including David. But I mean, going back to John Cage at the first June in Buffalo, which is a kind of a notorious lecture actually. But there are I mean, it's a who's who, of course, as you know. I mean, of contemporary music, and it's a really interesting resource. I wish there were a way to make that a little more public than it is right now, which is not at all. But yeah. So
I think if you have the transcriptions, it will lead to a publication of like
right.
significant lectures, or at
That's
least
right.
from like top composers, most significant composers, stuff like that. That's a great idea, because there's so much history.
Yeah.
Documenting it, I think it's
That would be
crucial.
amazing. Yeah.
For
It probably could be multi volumes of published work, to be honest. One per decade or something.
Right. That's right. I mean, because of course, they're not all equally fascinating, and some of them depend on maybe having been in the room and hearing the music being played live, or played recordings being played out. They might not translate as well as others, but I think many of them have been really quite
especially when the music is like special music, that's pretty hard to translate unless you have like a home theater 5.1 system, stuff like that. Like the first time I heard spatial music was in Junin Buffalo. I think it was a Senaki's piece, the percussion sextet. I
Yeah.
think it was right. Like
Yeah.
that really made an impression on me. Actually, my dissertation is a spatial piece for four guitars. Like, it influenced me in such a manner that I went
Right.
along and wanted to research that aspect of music that I don't see researched that often.
Right.
So the legacy of Union Buffalo is kind of like, I think it's huge. You mentioned that in Europe they all, the composers say that they want to come here. Like I think it's a pretty heavy legacy. Any thoughts on that? Like the legacy itself of the festival and its apportations to contemporary music, on what it means. Like now that you
Well,
are in this position, like because it's
Right.
you have a really, I think, like heavy responsibility, really big responsibility of following that tradition and that legacy. Like,
Right.
and I think that you are up to the task for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Well, so last year's festival, we celebrated 50 years of June in Buffalo. And it was not, there haven't been 50 June in Buffaloes. I should make that clear. It was 50 years since the founding of June in Buffalo in 1975. Morton Feldman started the festival in a form is almost unrecognizable to what we had now. I mean, it really wasn't the kind of symposium, conference, workshop that it became under David Felder's leadership. He really reconceived it. But they were really fascinating events, at least as far as one can read, from the programs and that sort of thing. But they weren't oriented around the emerging composers. They were really oriented around his senior composer guests. And he did a number of festivals, but then there was sort of a gap. And then David restarted the festival. So it's been 50 years, but not 50 festivals. But we'll, June in Buffalo will get to 50 festivals, not too long either. So, so last year really was a time to think about that question. I felt, very strongly, this kind of legacy question. And the thing that I'd say is, it's a remarkable number of composers who have been participants at June in Buffalo. And the percentage of those who have stayed in the field, have gone on to careers, I think is pretty extraordinary. And you run into them all the time. I'm aware of a lot of them over the last 30 years, but it's longer than that, of course. And, when we've been, interviewing candidates for jobs, people who apply are people who, many of whom have been in Buffalo participants, so they have some familiarity with the place in a sense through that. I think also in terms of ensembles, young ensembles who were invited to come and perform at June in Buffalo, who have gone on to really kind of major careers. The one that I have had personally the most contact with is the Switch Ensemble. You may be familiar with Switch. But David started inviting Switch, when they were really, I think, just getting themselves off the ground, and he recognized the potential and the talent of the people involved, and we've continued to bring Switch, and they've done really fabulous performances, and again, really. One of the things I've come to see, this is a little bit off the topic you asked about legacy, but is in terms of thinking also about organizing the festival. Which performers to bring is a really, really important question. I think I have taken the approach that, as I say, starting with the senior composers first, but then it's really essential that performers come who have both the right, the right instrumentation, let's say, to play pieces by those composers, but also will be sympathetic to that music. And ensembles, have a point of view very often. Not every ensemble plays every composer happily or well. Even among the top new music ensembles, they certainly, play a wide range of things usually, but but there are certain specialties that a group might have or might develop over time. And that's kind of important when you're choosing them. If you choose a group that is really great at doing a certain kind of thing, but that's not the thing that you're going to be doing most of, you may not get the results that you want. So that's that's something that has to be considered when choosing performers. You certainly need ensembles that are open to playing younger composers' music, but most ensembles are. I think you'd be hard pressed to find people that say, "Well, no, we only play established composers" or something like this. But in any event, the aesthetic direction is also, I think, kind of important there. So Juno Buffalo has been involved not only in the development of kind of generations of young composers, but also of ensembles and performers. That's what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it relates, and it's good that you have kind of like a resident ensemble like they're like the Sleep Sinfonietta. And I haven't worked with them. I don't think that Megan has, but I think that Shunting has.
Shunting has, yes.
So, what can you say about the Sleep Sinfonietta, Shunting?
I think they are very, very devoted to the performance. Yeah, I worked with them for my dissertation, and I could tell they pay tremendous attention to the detail on my score, and actually that was a recording session conducted by Dan Basin, and it was a very good reading actually. And later on when I used that recording for other opportunities, and usually the reaction was very positive as well. Yeah, I could tell they put a lot of work behind the scene. Yeah, because
Yeah.
we know the performance or the rehearsals are what we see, but there are a lot of stuff, a lot of work behind each performance.
Yeah, and you can compare them with other ensembles, I would guess, that had not played your music as well, probably.
Um,
So it was
I,
a good experience in comparison with other ensembles that you don't have to mention, let's say.
yeah, I won't mention.
Of
But
course, I don't
yeah,
know.
but in general, the performances I had in Junior Buffalo were pretty good, I would say. I
Did
don't
you work with the Sleep Sinfonietta in Juno Buffalo or other
no,
ensembles?
I worked with like Verge. Um, I worked with Aditi Quartet. I worked with a group from France called Linnea. They
Linnea.
are
Oh, yeah.
they were all good,
Sure.
I would say. Yeah.
Those are all, yes.
So yeah, that what you mentioned of the importance of having the performers like being open, being enthusiastic about the works. That's very important. I would say that can make or break, so to speak, like the spirit of a composer in a way, or the
Right.
beat or the recording, and that's kind of like, well, that can even make or break a career.
Mm-hmm.
One can continue there. Like one bad performance can be so frustrating that it can get you out of track and not
It's
come
true.
back. It's kind of like pretty sensible, pretty subtle
Yeah.
in a sense. Okay.
I add something to what Chanteng said, or just reaction. One of the things that the Sinfonietta can do, because because we're local, so to speak, is that we can offer some some special instruments. So when when you bring an ensemble, a fabulous ensemble from somewhere else, they're going to come with a certain instrumentation, and you have to decide on a number of players. With the Sinfonietta, if we really need someone who can play mandolin, we we can have that, or saxophone, even if it's not the instruments in the basic lineup. It's possible to expand it. So that gives us a certain kind of flexibility that's been very helpful, actually. And the second thing I would say is, you mentioned Dan Basson, a former colleague and former student, and Dan was one of quite a number of really wonderful conductors that we've been really lucky to be
composer
and
conductor. Yeah.
composer conductors, exactly. And so,
Yeah.
from these composer conductors, you see exactly this thing that this year I'm trying to kind of foster, because people like Dan, what they can do for their colleagues is so important, can be so significant in your life. The minute you have a composer maybe that you met in school, who goes on and conducts a major orchestra and says, I want to play this piece, composed by my friend. That could be like a real game-changing opportunity. So that's just one possible path. But someone that you meet at a festival, someone that was your colleague in school, someone that conducted the Sleaze Vignetta, who came in from outside to do that, and the people who have conducted it, it's quite an impressive list. People like, Brad Lubman, James Baker. We've really had some of the most amazing people. I mean, we've also had Matthias Pincher, and they're really some fabulous conductors.
So he's been there a few times, right? Because I remember him going during the year for lectures or for meeting with the composer seminar. But
right.
I probably a year that I was a grad student but wasn't in Union Buffalo, I think he went there as senior faculty for that. Like his ties with Buffalo are pretty tight. Like I would say, right?
Yeah. Well, again, David was really so thoughtful and so what's the word? Talented at organizing those kinds of relationships. I mean, that was, he was right on the verge of taking over the Ensemble into Contemporain, but nobody knew that. But I think David's instincts were really, really outstanding in kind of spotting talent and being able to make those things happen,
Really cool. Oh, can you speak then about this year specifically? Like give today this year's rundown on what's going on over there. Union Buffalo 2026. Who's going there? You already mentioned the idea of the composer conductor, but then again, yeah.
So our senior composers this year are my colleague Ming Tsao, who is my new colleague, our senior composer at UB. And Ming has been teaching now, I think 2 years he's been full-time. And he is an American composer who had been living in Europe for at least a couple of decades. He was based with his family in Berlin, and they've relocated to Buffalo, bought a absolutely wonderful house, and moved the most spectacular music library I've ever seen a single individual to possess. To Buffalo. It's really, really extraordinary collection of scores, also recordings, but the scores alone is like nothing I've ever seen in anyone's home. And Ming he's a really, really talented person. He's a wonderful composer. He's a brilliant thinker, and he's not a composer. He's not a conductor. So he's of the 5 seniors that we have, he's the one who will not be conducting his own piece. But I'm very, very happy to have him on board. I think it's quite important that UB composers be well represented in terms of the festival's kind of recruiting mission, really, frankly. And the others are all composer conductors. And I, in no particular order, I'll mention one I think you probably know, Christian Baldini. Christian is Argentinian composer conductor. He's a full professor at UC Davis, and he is someone who earned his PhD at UB, and also conducted the UB Symphony and the Sleaze Sinfonietta. And he came, I want to say 3 years ago, and did a really wonderful program with our Sinfonietta. I called it a Pan-American program. That's when Nora Ponte's piece was programmed. but it was composers of the Americas, and I was thinking specifically of the organization that Edgar Varese founded, back with people like Carlos Salcedo to promote music of the Americas, League of Composers back in the in the 20s. So Christian, that was the last time that Christian has been in Buffalo, and really happy to have him back. Then we have David Zubai, who is professor of composition at Indiana University and also the director of the Indiana New Music Ensemble. Another wonderful composer conductor, who, again, these are folks who don't just don't conduct their own music, but really, are involved in, premiering and furthering and supporting the works of other composers. David has been to June in Buffalo as a senior composer already, so he's the only repeat senior composer that we have this year. But it's been a number of years, and I'm really, really happy to welcome him back. We have a second David. We have David Fulmer, who's coming from New York. David is not only a composer conductor, but he's violinist composer conductor extraordinaire. He's at Hunter College. He's also in charge of their, of conducting activities there as well as composing. So he's a very multi-talented, multi-hatted, hat-wearing individual, and I'm really, really thrilled to have him. His career has done kind of amazing things in the last years. He's been everywhere doing a lot of things, writing a lot of music, conducting a lot of different orchestras and ensembles. So it's amazing to have him take the time to be with us. And so now I believe I've given you 4 out of 5. And last but not least is Jason Thorpe Buchanan, who comes to us from Germany, an American composer conductor who has been to Buffalo a lot of times in the recent years as the conductor of the Switch Ensemble. So last year Switch came and he wasn't able to be here. This year he's coming, but not Switch. So one of these years we'll get them aligned again. But in any event, Jason had been teaching in Dresden. He's been based in Germany now for a few years. He was teaching in Dresden, and he now has a position in Würzburg at the Hochschule there. And Jason brings a kind of technological side that I think is unique among these 5. So his own work nearly always combines acoustic instruments with technological elements. And that will be the case again this year.
That's pretty.
So, are you planning on performing in this Lisa Fanata too, or are you just wearing the director hat?
I'm still negotiating that with myself. Well,
there's not many hats you can wear at once. Yeah.
Right. I mean, each year that I've been the director, I've done some playing, and trying to find the right balance of it, because if I do too much, as I have on at least one occasion, it's hard. I'm not available, to look after things and to make sure that things are going the way we hope for that they will, or just to be able to take them in myself, because I'm in rehearsal during those times. And then you can imagine what it's like to be in rehearsal with me, because I have to have my phone sitting on the music stand so I can see if some kind of emergency message comes in. We can't get into this room. We can't find this. We need that. So I am like the most distracted rehearser, in the world, because the phone is like, going off, and I'm trying to decide whether I have to look at it or not, or I have to interrupt the rehearsal to reply. So I have to be cognizant of those things. The first 2 years, I was myself a senior composer, and I just felt that actually that was a bit too much. I was too busy, too occupied, too much of the time to really kind of be the director. So last year I was the first time I was not, and I won't be again this year. Which is fine with me. But I have to be careful that I then don't take on too much playing, even though I love to do it and I want to do it, you know. So I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't know yet how much I'm going to do.
Well, yeah,
You need 3 of you for the week.
don't
Exactly.
overwhelm yourself. It's a hectic week for if you only play one role. I can only imagine like going through so many things at the same time. When
Pretty much 8 till midnight is the job. 8 in the morning till midnight every day.
I can see that. Well, and yeah, there's also the social activities that go after and all of that. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's a great week. I would recommend it to any composer out there that haven't done.
No, it was. I mean, it was the highlight of living in Buffalo for sure. Like that, you know. Even some years I would participated, but even years I didn't participate, I was living in a city with one of the best, you know, new music festivals in the world, and I could go sit in the back for lectures and go to concerts every night, hang out with some of the best musicians from all over the world because, you know, composers are and performers are brought in from everywhere.
Yeah, it's like lectures are open to the public and concerts too, right? So it's kind
Right.
of like any musician that wants to kind of like broaden their horizons, their knowledge and stuff. I think that they can attend. When is it this year? What are the dates?
It's the very first week of June, June 1 through 7.
Okay, so
Ah,
in Buffalo will be like right there opening up June, right?
Think
That's
about a trip to Buffalo.
Yeah, I
Be
would
great to
love
see.
to. I haven't been there like since in 10 years or so. I I would love to do
I
that.
have to go back to one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
definitely. So I would say that would be the things that I wanted to discuss. Do you guys have any other questions? Any closing thoughts on this? I really enjoyed this. It's just going down memory lane and
Yeah.
see how the festival is in good hands for the future and
Well, thank
how
you.
many other composers are gonna get out of it what I got out of it, which is a lot. Believe me, I got a lot out of it. So uh, I'm glad. It brings happiness to my heart, to my artistic heart.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh,
say.
well, that brings happiness to my heart to hear that. It really does. You know, if we had the time I would love to hear about what your projects are, what you're all involved in. But I don't know if that's what you do on this podcast, but you know.
Oh,
We do anything.
right
No, I
now,
mean,
the last one I had
there you
was
go.
Aliet, and it was performed last year, and it took me a while to get a soprano to sing it. Hopefully I get to record it because it was my very first time dealing with the voice. It was like 2 songs, so one song it's kind of like yeah, it's kind of like it was different because I was kind of like getting away from the voice, like avoiding the voice, because I already knew that it was gonna take a lot of thought. You have to play with semantics, you and unite it with the voice. But I think that it came along pretty nicely. So I'm hoping that I can record it right now. Is what I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to, actually. So yeah,
Fantastic.
there's that, and
Yeah.
I'm on the lookout for the next composition project per se, but I'm kind of like trying to get that recorded, actually.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
My last piece, my last finished piece, is a piece for a keyboard synthesizer, which was first for me. I usually am a very, very acoustic minded. It was for my good friend Andrew Jamison, and I've written for him on the piano before, but he's been wanting me to write for his synthesizer for probably like 10 years, and then finally I'm like, okay,
Wow.
I'm gonna do it. And he knew my music really well. And once I got into it, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see why you wanted me to do this, but it was definitely a challenging project, and we're trying to figure out when to premiere that. And then, yeah, I have a lot of unfinished pieces. I've been teaching composition at a pre-college conservatory, so I give
Mm-hmm.
probably a lot of my best ideas to them. yeah, and I'm doing a lot of visual art and kind of looking for next. Next, I have a lot of projects with a lot of loose ends, but it's kind of trying to figure out, do I want to finish those or go to something different? But,
Right.
yeah.
And your synthesizer piece, is that like very specific about what instrument will be used, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I chose his specific model synthesizer. He has like a Yamaha, a specific one. Yeah, and what it can do. One of the hard parts for me too is that I didn't have regular access to the synthesizer, or really much access at all. And so a lot of the beginning stages was about like gestures, because I had no idea. We hadn't figured out any kind of patches, which would be the sound. So I had no idea what the sounds was going to sound like, because it could sound like anything at that point, because we hadn't actually figured out patches. So it was really a different way of thinking. I had to really think kind of more purely about the gesture, and then we kind of worked on the sound. Working on the sound was actually a very late stage in the piece, which yeah, it's not the way I normally would
Right.
work, but it was actually very fun. Yeah.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing that as well.
What about you, Sean? Out of the three of us, I would say that Sean is the one that's been more active as a composer. Right now, I teach at a university, but it's more like gen ed, humanities, and stuff like that. Like literature. I also got, like, in my bachelor, I did a degree on literature. So
Oh, okay.
that. So I'm being more of a Renaissance man, but still, this podcast been really important to me because it keeps me up with it keeps me talking and thinking about composition, and that's something that some people after graduation kind of like can't keep up with a career, and they have to change lanes and
Right.
get out of music. So I'm really trying to keep that as something central because it's so important, and not go astray. But yeah, definitely. But Shantin's got some projects, like he's
So-
gonna speak now a bit here.
Actually, the last finished and performed project was composed by the end of 2024 and performed last April in Hong Kong. Yeah, I wrote a musical tributes to my deceased mom, and in response to a call for score organized by Hong Kong Composers Guild. So
Okay.
I quickly wrote a piece for like a chamber orchestra. The piece itself, I would say is not, I mean, maybe not too special for other people, but it means quite a lot to myself. And because my mom, at the end of her life, she converted to Christianity, so I quoted Amazing Grace at the end of the piece as a source material, and it was the first time in my project that I tried to quote some like melody or some materials,
Right.
and I would say it was not that difficult, because initially I thought it would be pretty hard, because I had never done that, but somehow it's okay. Yeah, I could have done better, but yeah, I'm happy that I finished the piece anyway. Yeah. I made a lot of revision when they asked for the parts. Like, yeah. So probably caused some troubles to the administrators. But okay, it was performed anyway.
I have some of the participants this year who are doing the very same thing right now to me.
Yeah.
I remember that you also Shanting introduced me to this Hong Kong marine beast that is established in Belgium, and we kind of like during the pandemic recorded some pieces with her. That was a pretty cool project. So we also, at least me, I kind of search for sometimes for projects that to record my music, even if it's not performed. So there's that. I remember that was the piece that you were talking about, Shanting. Was it the traditional Chinese orchestra or no?
Oh, I
I don't.
wrote. You mean the Chinese orchestra piece that I wrote last year?
Yeah.
It was unfinished. I failed to finish by the deadline. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote it in response to another call. Yeah. I if you talk about like the marimba, I actually I wrote another piece from the marimbist Huang just mentioned, and
Viola.
I also I
No.
also work with Adila Yip, another marimbist, also Hong Kong performers, but based in Belgium. I wrote a marimba and bass clarinet duo. Yeah, but it was
Oh,
like
nice.
long time ago. It was a long time ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I remember when the premiere took place. I went to ER.
Fiona. Sorry.
I went to the emergency room because I suddenly felt like my arms were like numb.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, yeah. So I stayed the whole night in the emergency room in a hospital called Memorides in Brooklyn, and then when I headed out the emergency room, and then I looked at my phone to want to see if the recording was available, and I listened to that. And on my way when I took the cab, I thought, okay, it was very touching because I got to hear my piece solely because I could hear the piece, not about whether it is good or bad. I just felt, oh yeah, I could hear it, and
I'm alive.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I will forever remember that experience. I was very sad. I was very sad about that because I know the performance was like a few hours after because of the time difference. But I know where I could listen to the piece when I woke up, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow.
What about you, Jonathan? Are you composing? Do you have any projects in line?
I do. I actually, but I just wanted to say before I tell you that
Yeah.
I mentioned theremin cello, like that is a standing offer if you're interested. But cello pieces,
Yeah.
electric cello pieces, I or pieces that combine them in some way. This is all. Uh-oh. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because my
Yeah. That's
computer
good.
is
If we
my
manage to
computer is
duplicate
getting.
you for all these rules for June and Buffalo, we can have
I think we can do a
trios.
proposal, the three of us, like, and compose. Well, if you guys are interested, I will be really
Yeah,
interested.
I would definitely.
All like a
Yeah,
three of
I
us,
would.
like
Yeah.
we do this together. But the cool thing about the podcast and about like if we present things together is that each of us think about music very differently and have very
Right.
different styles. Like it would be a really cool project if we kind of like tackle the theremin cello. Definitely, it would be an honor, and it would
That
be
would
an
be really.
honor to work with
Yeah,
you.
it would be cool.
We
Yeah.
can develop something for that. Definitely, we will.
Yeah, I
Uh,
would love that. I would love that.
we can stay in
So
touch definitely for that specific project. Yep.
Yeah.
second. So yeah. So and sorry, the computer was sending me all kinds of messages. It's really freaking out.
Oh,
But anyway,
yeah.
you asked me about my own project. So
Yes.
so we watched at the very beginning. We watched a little bit of an electronic chamber opera, and my next project is a follow up to that. Is another one.
Oh, pretty.
Kind of in that genre of chamber opera that uses electronic instruments, and it's a
Will it-
project I've been conceiving
be
of now for a while.
Would it be like a follow up in terms of thematically or a literal follow up, like the second part of this
No,
mental?
not right.
No,
No,
that,
it's a new one. It's a new one. It's more a follow up in the sense of this idea of electronic chamber opera.
okay.
It's not thematically connected at all, actually.
Okay. Anyway,
But
I think that it is. I think what I've heard, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It sounds like haunting, and I kind of like some. I have an attraction for eerie stuff, and kind of like the theremin cello in itself, the timbre kind of like lends itself to that. And that ending, I think that it was chef kiss.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I
Does
haven't
it
heard it.
have a scheduled date to be completed by or premiered or?
The new piece?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it really doesn't. And there's, I just approached someone about a libretto. It's a more in the past I've mostly adapted my own librettos from literary sources, and this one I feel like I need a writer. I need someone who wants to take this on. It's going to be a combination of some different sources, and I don't trust myself to be the one that does it. And anyway, I think it's more fun. It's more fun to have
Yeah.
a collaborative partner than to do all of everything yourself always.
I will
So
agree. I will agree because the songs that I mentioned, I work with a living poet, my age,
yes,
and it's a totally different experience. And I will go than me going to I don't know, somebody like let's say Alan Poe, somebody like Edgar Allan Poe, and trying to
Mhm.
musicalize it. It's not
Right,
back and forth. It's not an active dialogue, I would say,
right,
between artists, and that kind of like dialogue going back and forth, me analyzing the text, going back to him is kind of like, did you mean this? What did you want that? What did you want to do here? Because with that intention made clear to me, I will get inspiration or ideas for composition. I think that what you're saying is um, very fruitful artistically and creatively speaking. If one
yeah,
is in oneself, well, it gives another result of creativity. But I think that dynamicism kind of like shines through, definitely. And searching for a writer, do you have anybody in mind?
I do. I actually there's some Buffalo writers,
Mm-hmm.
and so maybe either a small team or one particular writer who's a novelist, who's at the university and does really interesting work. So we're just starting the discussion. I've been
Nice.
sort of wrestling these ideas around myself now for a while, and I feel like I'm ready to kind of hammer them out with someone else now. And so, that's the current project. And the other thing is just that I've been kind of trying to immerse myself in the world of modular synthesis so that I could create a kind of a sound world for the theremin cello or for the electric cello or for the acoustic cello for that matter, a kind of musical partner for me in that world of kind of generative music. And so that's been an ongoing project that started in the pandemic and it,
That will be like live electronics, live processing,
right,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So is the
That
goal to use it for compose pieces for it, or to use it as an improvisation tool, or?
I think both. I think both. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
we'll
will
see
do.
what comes out of it, but
Do you
I
do
will.
you still do a lot of improvisation?
I do. I do actually. In fact, tomorrow I was asked to play with a colleague of mine, a violist colleague of mine, and she's doing a concert. I think it's really since you all have been in Buffalo that the silos, the grain silos, became kind of a venue that.
It was like the very, very end as we were transferring out. I remember.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's a zone in the old industrial grain elevator district of Buffalo, called that's come to be known as Silo City. And initially, there were a number of performances. Some of the earliest of them I was involved in the grain silos with this tremendous natural reverb, and that was fantastic. Then they built a venue, or they kind of reconstructed a building, and turned it into a venue for music. And there are concerts every Saturday that I often go to hear friends and colleagues play. And tomorrow, my violist colleague, Leanne Darling, is doing a program and asked me if I would come and do some improvising with her. So, as well as playing a composition of hers. So yeah, it's all ongoing, that the improvised work. Also, with more like sort of avant-garde jazz musicians and that sort of thing. That's that's ongoing too. So you can
Nice.
find some of that music online. There's a trombonist, Michael Vlatkovich, a West Coast trombonist that I've worked with a lot over the years. We have a number of recordings. So
Very cool.
Really cool. Awesome, man. Well, does anybody want to ask anything else? Any closing thoughts? Anything to lead on? I think we're
No, it's just
good.
it's been really great to have you, and it's like especially when we have guests from when we were all in Buffalo, it always just feels like a little bit like a homecoming, and it's
Yeah, you mentioned
yeah, it's
Spain.
really
We
fun.
had Spain. We had Dan
We
Bassin.
had Zane, yeah.
Like
yes,
Pauline.
yes, I mean to watch them all. I got started on it, but the project of watching a bunch of them. But yeah,
We know
you
you're
do a
busy.
wonderful program. I love it.
We know you're really busy,
Yeah.
especially on this upcoming
It
day.
sounds like they're very busy. Yeah.
It's kind of like it's all good. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
My pleasure. My
Yes.
pleasure. Great to see you all. Really great. So we'll be in
Yeah.
touch.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, definitely. We can talk to
Definitely.
German show.
Thanks for everything. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I wore this for your benefit for Morton Feldman 100th birthday celebration.
it's looking
Awesome.
judging. So that's a good way to close this one. A great way. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.